this is what we give up.
Thank you very much, Danielle, for talking to us. I was wondering if you could maybe say something about just a little quick summary of yourself, what you're doing, where you're coming from.
Of course. My name is Danielle Christmas. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And my work is on representations of Nazis and slaveholders in literature and in film.
What's the media reception of this PRISM scandal at the moment? Is it still going?
It's risky to say that it's not, but I don't think it is. I mean, the 24-hour news cycle here, and I imagine it's the same in Australia, is so rapid and so sort of caught up on the sexy topic of the day that I think it sort of peaked near the end of June. People stopped being interested in the kind of sexy, like, who knew what and is this illegal? That stopped being a sort of main part of the conversation. We got caught up in what's going on with the Trayvon Martin case, and now today Anthony Weiner is not wearing clothes again. You know? So these are the things that are catching American attention right now.
Is this Anthony Weiner who photographed pictures of his crotch and tweeted them to people? Right.
Yes, he got caught today on, is it Instagram or something? Yeah. So that's what everyone's interested in at the moment. I mean, post continues, surveillance continues, but it's something, it is naturalized. You sort of mentioned that before, and you'll probably edit this out.
No.
But it's completely naturalized. It's not something that we're arguing about anymore. When everything peaked in June, it feels like there's been a sort of ebb and flow. I mean, everything blew up with the Patriot Act, and how is our privacy being, how are they taking away our rights, our ability to share ideas without sort of getting in the middle of what we're doing on the phone and on the internet. And people stopped being interested because it was important for safety. And that narrative has continued even though this kind of upset came up. Even the people who progressives are really supportive of in the government are sort of saying, like, this is how it is. There's nothing you can do about it. And at this point, it feels like fighting it wouldn't even be helpful.
And can I take you back to I don't want to say the origins of this debate too much, but the where this really started is partly around the Patriot Act and obviously the aftermath of 9/11. I wonder if you can give us an American perspective on that kind of issue.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting. I was in undergrad at the time. I was in college at the time. So this was happening at a moment when I was just developing an online identity. I mean, Facebook didn't come out until I was a senior in college. So that whole explosion of putting your entire life on the internet hadn't really happened in any remarkable and dramatic way, the way that it has exploded since Facebook became so popular. And I mean, but even with cell phones, I do think after the Patriot Act, what we read was happening in the Patriot Act sort of felt, in popular culture and in conversation, we know this is happening. It's sort of, it's a violation of privacy rights, but it isn't something that we feel so deeply. But as soon as you start to develop a sort of firm online identity and you have the sense that somebody's always watching, then it becomes, it starts to feel a little creepy. And then we find out that, like, they're looking at our phone records, and that too feels creepy. So there's this sense of discomfort, but not, I've noticed a sort of cultural malaise about it. Nobody is sort of panicking where I am, and from my point of view.
Is there anything about, like, the proliferation of CCTV camera footage that you'd like to say?
It's an interesting debate. This is a sort of, I think this touches on what you're saying. For example, in Chicago, where I live, there are starting to be cameras everywhere. And the narrative is the same. We're doing this for safety. Like, so, everybody's sort of concerned about the growth of criminal, activities in this city and in other major U.S. cities. And so we've all come up with this. Well, I think politicians have come up with the idea that this is a solution because it's a cheap solution and it's a viewable solution. It's something we can see. Whether or not people are willing to share statistics about whether this is working, Big Brother is looking, is it changing anything? But there seems to be a social contract that we agree that this is, maybe this is working, but even if it's working just a little bit, it's worth giving this up. I mean, it's fascinating to view, and it's especially interesting to think about. I mean, even as scholars, sometimes I overthink things, and then just as a citizen and a consumer, I watch my own reaction, especially about Prism and about all of this, and say, I personally am kind of creeped out about it, but this isn't the thing I'm taking up. Like, this isn't my issue, but it's huge, right? Like, when you start thinking about what the politics of this is and the scale of it, and when government starts to kind of take these actions, it's very unlikely that they're ever going to scale back. The only likelihood is that they're going to start doing more surveillance. So now would be the time probably to start to consider panicking. I don't want to be alarmist, but if you're going to be concerned about this as an issue that's, that could really explode, we're watching and quiet. And even those of us who are concerned are watching and quiet. And it's a strange moment, I think. It's a strange moment in time to see. I think that at some point in 10 years, we're going to look back at this as a turning point and say, like, there was an important and major shift right now. And I wonder what we're shifting towards, but I think it's pretty clear that the idea that we're willing to give away all of this information, like these things that compose an identity, what I think, what I believe, what my weight is, what my height is, what I'm talking to my boyfriend about, all of these things, like the email I sent my mom, the e-card I posted to my sister's Facebook wall. These are things that we've ultimately agreed, like, I'd prefer they be kept private, and it's, if we put something on the internet, we have to have a certain sense that this is exposed. We're giving it away to a base of people that we're not going to, that isn't definable easily. But the idea that people in authority are looking at this and evaluating us as agents worth watching, it's something we've finally settled into. And this became normalized at the moment, I think, that online identities really picked up. So at the same moment as we have Facebook exploding, we have the idea that it's okay to surveil online and by phone and by text. So, these things are matching up so neatly that I think it feels natural that this is what it means. Like, this is what it means to be online and engaged. It's something we don't really like, but that's what we have to agree to. And I don't think, the largest population that's consuming the internet and creating, the next generation of online identities, these are like the younger people who only know the Patriot Act in the United States, right? Who are coming up in the panic of 9/11. And so this is what it means to be civic. So it's an interesting moment in time. We're at a cultural shift, a turning point.
I still surprise students when I say that I never sent my first email until first year uni. And you're right, we grew up in a different time. We're of a different so-called generation. And I'm wondering if I can get your perspective on this. The RFID chip, the radio frequency identification device, is that still news, or is that completely old news in America? Because there were news stories and some controversy but some years ago that I was watching, but even then there were advertisements that were completely naturalizing the RFID chip. And I want to get your perspective on this. Is it old news in America, and does it surprise you that incredibly few, if any, Australian students I teach in class know what an RFID chip is?
Oh boy. It is old. Well, it is. It's completely old news, and you make me think I want to go in and ask my students if they know what it is, and I can almost, I have a degree of certainty that they don't. Because, they have a sense that this is what it means. That like if I ask you, are you online? What are you doing online? What does it mean to be online? You're going to explain to me, to the alien who asked you that, because they don't know what the internet is. You're going to explain to them that it means engaging and like a worldwide exchange of information, and intrinsic into what this has become. It's just underlined with this. There is no world in which you can explain the internet as it exists today in a way that removes it from that level of surveillance. So that's what it means to be on the internet. It's fascinating to be in this place, kind of what you were saying. I don't feel so old, but there is such a shift in the way that we exchange information so quickly, that the fact that like there is a moment at which I was like a voting adult before, I sent email, that is completely separate from the students who I'm teaching who were brought up with a laptop in front of them. So I think there's also that gap, and a sort of clear gap too. So those of us who had, a certain level of adult politics in place when internet came into being, and we had a sense that there was a moment at which technology didn't mean all of these things. So we have a special level of discomfort and confusion about it. But the people for whom this is what the internet has turned into, like a truly patriotic American accepts that this is what we give up to be citizens, to do our citizenship well. This is what we've agreed is the fair and honest way to participate. And if we fight too much, then what are we trying to hide? Isn't that suspicious, that we want to say, I don't want you reading my email. I don't want you to know what I got my best friend for a present. I don't want you to know, if I complained about my mom. If I really want to support what America is about, I'll give up that information with a smile on my face. It's an interesting test of a test of loyalty. And the same people, especially in American politics, the same people who are raging about government intervention, what we would call the political right, the people who are saying the government has their hand into too much of our lives, are the same people who are saying, no, except with this. Except with this, we need you to let us in, open the door, welcome us in. If we need some more information, can we please have it? We want you to stop complaining. We're going to ask your cell phone company. Everybody calm down. Except, but otherwise get out of my house. It's a fascinating discourse. And it's so, that creates a certain kind of schizophrenic politics. And I'm sure it's happening in Australia, some iteration of that conversation. It's happening all over, what we would imagine to be the West. The rise of the West and these sort of disagreements. So it's a fascinating it has an interesting place in political discourse, in political fighting.
I'd like to finish by quoting something one of our former Prime Ministers said several years ago, which speaks to the heart of the issue of surveillance, and I think is the perfect way to end this meLecture. In 2011, on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd declared that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. What you might like to think about this week is whether freedom might also be the cost of eternal vigilance. Goodbye. Can't you play any real music?
Oh, shut up.